What is the creepiest thing that ever happened to you, but never told anyone? I was home alone one night, just winding down after a long day. The house was quiet, and I settled into bed, ready to drift off. Suddenly, I heard a soft tapping sound coming from my window. At first, I thought it was just the branches of a tree, but then it got louder and more insistent. Curiosity got the better of me, so I crept over to the window. As I pulled back the curtain, my heart dropped. There, staring back at me, was a figure, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes. It wasn't just a trick of the light. It felt like it was looking right through me. I blinked, and in that split second, it vanished. I rushed to check the locks, but everything was secure. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, questioning my sanity. To this day, I can't explain what I saw, but I've never felt so watched and vulnerable in my own home. Sometimes, I wonder if it was just a figment of my imagination or something far creepier. I spent a week in New Brunswick helping my mom clear out my grandfather's house after he passed. He lived right across from the ocean, so I took the chance to hunt for seashells every day, starting a little collection on the porch. One day, during an estate sale, an overly friendly couple approached me, claiming to be my grandfather's friend. They noticed my shells and invited me to their home to pick up more. Feeling awkward, I laughed it off, but my mom's husband jumped in and agreed for me to go. So, I found myself in their car, and they started firing off questions: what grade I was in, my hobbies, if I was a party girl or studious. I had to stop them and clarify I was 20 and not in school. Suddenly, their bubbly energy vanished, and the ride turned silent. When we finally arrived, the lady filled a bag with shells, and they dropped me off without a word. It was one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had. When I was 13, my dad surprised me with a PlayStation 2. I was so excited, but then my best friend showed up, inviting me to spend the weekend at his dad's house. My mom insisted I go, saying the game would still be there when I got back. Reluctantly, I agreed. At his house, his mom warned us about accepting drinks, but as soon as we got in the car, his dad offered us beers. We were just kids, and we said no. The whole weekend turned into chaos. His dad was drunk, throwing a wild party with loud music and fights. It was a nightmare. Sunday night came, and his dad was supposed to take us home. He was completely wasted, zigzagging down the road. I thought we were going to crash. It was terrifying, and I just wanted to be back home with my new game. I was 21, walking between work buildings around 10 p.m., just a quick 5-minute stroll. Suddenly, a silver minivan with stuffed animals on the windshield pulled up beside me. The driver rolled down the window and asked if I needed a ride. I was already annoyed with my job, so I shot back, nope. He didn't take the hint and kept firing questions at me, which I ignored. Then he asked my name. I stopped, he stopped, and we just stared at each other for what felt like 2 solid minutes. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of him with flash, definitely not discreet. He drove off, and I thought that was the end of it. But a week later, the same thing happened to a female coworker. She told him to F off and called the cops. I shared my picture with them, but I never found out if anything came of it. Later, we learned there had been a string of sexual assaults in the area, and all employees were warned to avoid that path. I still get chills thinking about it. The ick factor was indescribable. When I was 14, I was walking home in my tiny town of just 100 people. I spotted a former neighbor who had moved away, parked at the park. I thought he was just visiting someone. As I was just steps from my yard, he pulled up beside me, trying to convince me to get in his car to see his nephew, who was my friend. I kept saying no, but he got angrier, even offering me a ride home, which was only a 2-minute walk away. Then, he reached for something in the passenger seat and tried to grab the door handle. Just then, another neighbor came out, and he sped off. A couple of months later, I found out he kidnapped another girl at knife point. I never told anyone because everyone knew he was a creep. It wasn't until my grandma mentioned his arrest that I realized how close I had come to being a victim. I felt this heavy guilt for not speaking up. I heard my dad call my name. It wasn't unusual, but he usually knocked instead of yelling. I stepped outside, but his truck was nowhere to be seen. Then I heard it again, my name, urgent this time. I checked his house, no truck. I called him, but he didn't answer, which was odd. He always picks up. Then, without thinking, I grabbed my keys and hit the road. I took a back road, and after a few miles, I crested a hill. There it was, his truck, upside down on the side of the road. He was alive, but dazed, with a mild concussion. His phone, still in his pocket. I let him believe it was just a coincidence that I felt the urge to drive that day. But deep down, I knew it was more than that.
After my husband died of bone cancer at 50, I experienced a day of grief so intense that I went to bed crying. When I tried to get up, I was horrified to find I couldn't walk. I had to pee so badly, but my body just wouldn't cooperate. In a panic, I grabbed a trash can and, well, you can imagine how that went. It was a wake-up call. I always thought I was strong and that psychosomatic reactions were just nonsense. But here I was, physically incapacitated by grief. After a long sleep, I woke up and could walk again, but the trash can, not my proudest moment. I later learned that it's not uncommon for grief to manifest physically, sometimes mirroring the ailments of the person we lost. For a whole year, I kept crutches under my bed, just in case that feeling returned. Then, after my mom passed from Alzheimer's, my dad went through days of confusion and forgetfulness. It's fascinating and terrifying how deeply our emotions can affect our bodies. Grief is a powerful force, and it can show up in ways we least expect.
When I was 9, I traveled to Mexico for my sister's wedding. I had this stunning blonde hair that fell past my butt. One day, while shopping with my sister, mom, and brother-in-law, I wandered off to another aisle. I noticed 2 men following me, whispering in Spanish. I was oblivious, just admiring trinkets. Suddenly, my brother-in-law rushed over, grabbed my arm, and hurried me out of the store. He told my sister he overheard those men talking about wanting to take me and sell me. For the rest of the trip, every adult was overly protective, and I was furious at the time. Years later, it hit me. Wow, I was almost trafficked. My brother-in-law, who's white with platinum blonde hair, probably made them think we couldn't understand Spanish. Thank goodness he was there to protect me. One summer night, my sister, cousin, and I decided to head out to the country to steal a road sign with our family's name on it. We didn't have the right tools, so we turned back to grab them. On the way home, my sister and I swear we saw a car stopped at a stop sign that shouldn't have been there. Cousin wasn't paying attention, but we both saw this vehicle moving towards the stop sign. Then it just vanished behind a cornfield. The headlights had this strange, luminous glow. It felt off, so instead of looking for tools, we went to our room. Suddenly, my car alarm went off, and I rushed to the window. No one was there. Then, out of nowhere, the light bulb in our room blew. It was just too weird. After that night, we never messed with those signs again. I lived alone, and one night, I was walking down this empty hallway, just bare walls and carpet. Suddenly, I noticed a quarter rolling across the floor, stopping right at my feet. My heart dropped. I mean, what could possibly explain that? Sure, there's probably a logical reason, but in that moment, I was convinced I was in a horror movie. Then there was this other time, late at night, I was out running in the dark, doing my zombies run app. You know that feeling when you think something's creeping up behind you? I turned around, ready to laugh at myself for being paranoid, and there it was, a large, sinister creature lunging at me. My heart raced, and I nearly lost it. But it was just a golden retriever, wagging its tail, thinking we were playing a game. Talk about a heart-stopping moment. I barely left my first apartment, only venturing out for groceries or the occasional doctor's appointment. I was deep into my online work when I reconnected with some old friends and decided to visit them for a night. The next morning, I returned home to find my doorknob on the mat, mangled, and a new one installed. Panic set in as my key wouldn't work. Amidst the chaos, I discovered a crude map tucked under the broken doorknob, leading me to my neighbor's potted plants. Under one, I found a key that unlocked my door. Inside, my apartment was a disaster. Everything was overturned, but nothing seemed stolen. My PC and PS3 were untouched, and even my birth certificate was on the floor. My landlord was baffled, claiming only he and I had keys. It was bizarre. Who would break in, replace the lock, and leave a map to the key? My neighbors heard nothing. After that, I moved out quickly, but the paranoia lingered. I started barricading the door and compulsively checking the locks. It was a strange, unsettling experience that left me on edge for months. About 10 years ago, at 22, I finally opened my store after 2 grueling years as a trainee. I was working 55 to 70 hours a week, and by the end of each day, I was completely drained. One night, I had this vivid dream where a predator creature was hunting me. We fought, and just as it lunged for my stomach, I jolted awake. I got up, splashed some water on my face, and when I looked in the mirror, I was hit with the biggest shock of my life. There, across my belly, was a perfect red handprint. Fingers, arm, the whole deal. I spent 10 minutes trying to match my arm to the print, but there was no way to do it without dislocating something. I distinctly remember waking up on my back. Now, this isn't a one-time thing. A couple of times a year, I wake up face down on my arm, only to find another print on my belly or chest. I still can't figure out how that first one happened. It's a mystery that keeps me guessing. I remember riding the bus from my small Northern California town to San Francisco to visit my dad. One day, it was packed, and a man in his late 40s sat next to me. He started chatting about his wife and how much she loved cooking for him. He went on and on, saying he sometimes brought strangers home for dinner. I was just a 14-year-old girl, and it felt so odd. Then, the bus driver suddenly yelled at me to stop talking and demanded to know my age. His anger was shocking. I sat there, confused and silent for the rest of the ride. Why was this man so friendly? How could his wife be okay with him bringing home random people? And why was the bus driver so harsh? Did he really think it was safer to leave me alone in the dark? It was a strange mix of kindness and fear that left me questioning everything.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.